Hi, my name is Melissa, and as you can tell by the title of the page, this is my YouTube page. Generally, my daughter posts videos on here, but I've been wanting to do it for a while, and I was looking it up earlier and found that there's not really a lot of information where people go into detail about um, pregnancy and miscarriage, especially ectopic pregnancy, because it's not really discussed that much. And this is something that at the time I was going through it, I definitely, if the internet would have been as popular as it is now, at that point, I would have wanted to know about it or to have been able to look up information. So my story starts on Valentine's Day of 2001. I was 16. I had been in a relationship with a boy for about 3 months at this point, and we were of the mindset that teen pregnancy is not going to happen to me. We were being careful, but not as careful as we could have been. We'll put it that way. So my period was late, and on Valentine's Day, I took a pregnancy test and I found out I was pregnant. We were young, and we had no idea what we were in for, but we would have done what we had to do to make sure that that baby had everything that she needed. Now that I have a pregnancy that went full term that I can compare it to, I know that my pregnancy wasn't, I guess, like what you would consider normal. I didn't gain as much weight with her as I did with my daughter. So, like I said, I found out I was pregnant on February 14th, 2001. In May, it was the Friday before Labor Day, so it was around the 24th of May, and I feel horrible that I don't remember the exact date, but I don't. So I had a regular doctor's appointment, and I was 20 weeks. I go in, and the doctor tells me to lay down, and she puts the Doppler on my stomach to listen to the baby's heartbeat, and she can't find it. So she tried for a couple minutes, had me put my feet up, move this way, move that way. Then she stops and she tells me it could just be that the baby is laying facing you with its back at, the outside of my stomach. So she said, I'm going to send you over to the hospital for an ultrasound. And by the way, you're far enough along now that they should be able to tell you the sex of the baby. So I'm like, all right, not even really thinking that anything could be wrong. I'm more excited that, I get to find out what it is today. So I drink the 2 20-ounce bottles of water, and I go in at the local hospital to have this sonogram done. The lady has me lay down, and she pulls the screen to where I can't see it. And she's looking for like a couple minutes, and then she says, hold on, I'll be right back. And she goes and gets this other doctor. Well, the other doctor kept saying, let me see the baby's heart and let me see the baby's brain. Well, at this point, I'm starting to get concerned, and I'm like, what's going on? Is there something wrong? And she kept saying, we can't tell you, you gotta wait till you can talk to your doctor. Your doctor will tell you everything once you go to her office. So I'm like, okay. I said, well, my doctor did tell me that you'd be able to tell me the sex of the baby. Can you tell me what I'm having? And she said, the baby is a girl. So I'm like, yes, we already had her name picked out. Her name was going to be Madison Rose. And I'm like, haha, I told you, I knew it was a girl. So it was a couple more minutes of, them looking at different parts of the baby. And then she said, okay, sonogram's done. We're going to send it over to your doctor's office. Go head back there, which was literally a 5-minute drive up the road. And, she'll be able to tell you everything. So I'm like, okay, she didn't seem like different. So I'm thinking everything's okay. Well, we go back to her office, and I sat there and waited for like 10 or 15 minutes. And they take us into her actual office, like where she has her desk and like all of that. And she said, I'm sorry to tell you, I have bad news. They weren't able to find a heartbeat. So my boyfriend at the time and I just completely lost it. I mean, we're sobbing like, I didn't know what to say or do. So she gave us a couple minutes and she said, I want you to go home and pack a bag. I'm going to admit you into the hospital. She said, we're going to try for about 24 hours to make you go into labor. We'll be putting these pills on your cervix to soften it up so that it can dilate and you can push the baby out. Or if that doesn't work, I'll have to do a D&C. So I'm like, okay, I'm devastated. I don't even know what to say, do, or think at this point. So we go home. I packed a bag. And a friend of mine had bought this purple stuffed lamb. And my birthday had been the month before in April. And she gave that to me for my birthday and told me that it was for Madison, for when the baby was born. We didn't know what she was yet, but I had a feeling that it was a girl. So I took that with us. We go to the hospital. She tried for the full 24 hours to make me go into labor, but it didn't work. So at the end of her office day, she came into the hospital and said, it's been 24 hours. You're not dilated at all. I wasn't even really having contractions, maybe like a couple small ones, but it really wasn't doing anything. So she said, we're going to do a D&C. Well, I wish that I would have known what a D&C consisted of. And if you don't want to know, I would fast forward probably 30 seconds or so. But a D&C is basically where they use the same machine they use to give abortions, and they force your cervix open, which can damage it for future pregnancies, and then they suck out everything inside of your uterus, and the baby comes out in pieces. This is something that I didn't know. If I would have known then, I probably would have made her let me try longer to go into labor. My risk of infection was nothing compared to, if I would have had a baby that I would have gotten to have a funeral for. And I didn't know that they dispose of babies the way that they do whenever you have a D&C either. They basically just throw them away. So I have the D&C done, and that night after everyone went home, my boyfriend was there in the hospital with me, and he just laid his head in my lap, and we just bawled, just uncontrollably. And, we said, we'll try again. I only had a week of school left. And then the following school year was my senior year. I was getting ready to graduate. We said, let me graduate from high school. We'll both get good jobs and we'll try again. So I graduated that May of 2002. And in June, I quit taking my birth control. And we tried again. Well, in the middle of August, I found out I was pregnant again. I almost immediately knew something was wrong, though, because I was having pain in my left side, like by my hip area, if I would walk for a long time or if I was on my feet for a long time. By this time, I did have a decent job. I was working at a gas station, but I was making almost $10 an hour. And the long shifts, I just had a lot of pain. Well, I was at work one evening. This is like mid-September. So about 3 or 4 weeks after I originally found out I was pregnant again. And I go to the bathroom and I'm bleeding. So I'm like, oh my gosh, this is definitely not normal. So I called my boyfriend and he happened to be off of work, and a coworker of mine drove me and him up to the hospital. The ER doctor was just very rude and said, I don't know, I was bawling because he told me you're either having a miscarriage or you're having an ectopic pregnancy where the baby, instead of implanting in your uterus, has implanted itself in your fallopian tube and it's growing there. And, if that's the case, you're going to have a miscarriage anyway. So I'm like, oh my gosh, what else could go wrong? So they did an original HCG count, which, if you don't know, HCG is the hormone that your body produces while you're pregnant, and told me to come back in 3 days and have another blood draw so they could check the levels again. So I said, okay. So I'm like, what am I supposed to do? And they said, well, if the blood becomes bright red or you start passing clots, to come back. Other than that, wait till I have the next blood draw, call my doctor's office, and do what she tells me to do. So I'm like, okay, I can do that. So 3 days later, I go to the hospital, have another blood draw, and I'm at work. My dad calls me and tells me that my doctor's office just called my house, my parents' house, and said that I needed to call them. So I call and she said, I'm sorry to tell you, your HCG level did not go up like it's supposed to. It's at least supposed to double every 2 to 3 days, and it only went up like a couple 100 points. So she said, you're either having a miscarriage or an ectopic pregnancy. But she didn't tell me my doctor needed to see me, nothing. She just said, if you don't stop bleeding within the next week, let us know. So I'm like, okay. So over the next week, I'm bleeding off and on, but I'm still having a lot of pain. So I called her office, and I'm trying to get in. Well, I can't get an appointment for another 3 weeks, which is strange because of what was going on with my pregnancy. So fast forward to October 12th. I wake up in the middle of the night in excruciating pain in a puddle of blood. My boyfriend and I actually walked from our apartment to a restaurant, which was right up the road from where we lived, and called an ambulance for them to take me to the hospital. I remember the people at the hospital, at the restaurant that we were waiting at, was mortified because I'm standing there pouring blood. like white as a ghost. I'm shaking. They were like, oh my God, lay down. So I get to the hospital. They rushed me in to do a sonogram, and they said that I had an ectopic pregnancy. My fallopian tube had ruptured. And they were getting ready to take me into surgery. Well, I distinctly remember her telling me that she took my whole fallopian tube because she told me it would take me longer to get pregnant because I only had one fallopian tube. This is important, and you'll see why in a couple minutes. So she told me to wait 2 years before I tried to have another baby. She said, you need to give your body time to heal from the surgery. So I'm like, okay. Well, over that time, me and that boyfriend broke up. So over the next 7 years, I ended up being with a guy for 5 years, never got pregnant one time, tried to make an appointment to go see her to see what was going on, because obviously I could get pregnant before and I'm not getting pregnant now. There's something wrong. Well, she refused to see me unless I had $85 for a doctor's appointment and money up front for any blood work or tests that she was going to order for me to have done. So I'm like, ooh, that's a bit steep. So this brings us to the summer of 2009. By this point, I'm 25. I kind of had a fling with a guy that I worked with. And lo and behold, at the end of August, I find out I'm pregnant. I'm shocked. Because I'm like, it's been 7 years, I haven't been able to get pregnant in 7 years. Must have been the guy I was with. But I'm thrilled, I'm like, this is it. Third time's a charm. The time has finally come for me. I finally get to have the baby that I've wanted to have for so long. But almost immediately, I start spotting. But it wasn't like the bleeding I'd had before, and I didn't have any pain. So I'm like, well, maybe this is implantation bleeding, or the internet was much more prevalent by this time, so I could find more information. So I'm like, let me make an appointment with a new doctor. I'm going to start fresh, but I'm going to have this baby. Figuring out this baby's due in May of 2010. I'm very excited. Well, a few days later, I noticed I'm spotting, and I saw some little blood clots, and the blood was a brighter red than it had been. So I go to the emergency room, and the doctor actually told me that he saw the pregnancy in my uterus. He was like, it's definitely not in your fallopian tube. It's definitely in the uterus. You just can't see it very well yet. So I'm like, okay. Well, on September 11th, and after that visit to the emergency room, I called my first doctor's office because I made an appointment with another OB, so I had switched, but I called the doctor that did my original surgery, and I said, I'm pregnant again, but I'm having spotting. I just want to make sure that she said that she removed my whole fallopian tube, and her secretary said, let me look at the notes from her surgery and I'll call you back. Well, she called me back and said that it's in her notes that she only took half of the tube. So I'm like, that's weird. I remember her telling me she took the whole thing. And I even called the guy that I was with at that time, and I said, do you remember when that happened? And I said, do you remember her saying she took my whole fallopian tube? And he said, yeah, I remember her saying that. So I'm like, all right, I know I'm not crazy. So on September 11th, I go to the bathroom, and there was a big blood clot. So I start freaking out. I'm like sobbing. My dad like comes to the door of the bathroom. He's like, oh my gosh, what's wrong? And I'm telling him, I'm bleeding. I was like, I need to go to the hospital right now. So a friend of mine ended up going to the hospital with me. And the doctor at the hospital actually told me, if you're going to keep having pregnancies like this, you might want to think about not trying to have any more children. This was before, like, she knew anything that was going on. Like, she knew about my history, but I didn't tell her, like, why I was there or anything. So, they do another HCG level, because the first time I'd been at the hospital, when the doctor told me he saw the pregnancy in the uterus, they did an HCG check then. So she did another one and ordered an ultrasound and said that they could see the baby in my left fallopian tube. And I'm like, that's impossible because I only have half a tube there. And she said, well, you can still have an ectopic pregnancy in a half a tube. So I'm like bawling, devastated. I was like screaming. I remember there was this one nurse there. She was very compassionate. She came in and just let me cry on her shoulder, gave me a box of tissues, told me everything's going to be okay, And I told her, no, it's not. Like, I wanted to have a baby forever. I thought this was it. I was an emotional wreck. So I told them that I wanted a new OB doctor, and they said, well, the doctor on call, and gave me her name. They said, she'll be in to see you after her regular office hours tomorrow. So they admitted me in the hospital, and the next day I waited until about 4:30. She came in, and the very first question she asked me, she said, do you want to have children? And I said, yes. And she said, okay. She said, I didn't want to, do tests and stuff if you didn't want to have children. And I said, I very much do. I said, I've tried, every time I get pregnant, I either have a miscarriage or an ectopic pregnancy. And she said, okay, so I'm like bawling again. And she said, well, there's some tests that we can do. We can do a test to see if your fallopian tubes are open. And she said, if, one's open and one is not, then we can take out the tube that's not open and, you'll be able to get pregnant. So I'm like, okay. So over the next couple months, they do an HSG test. It's called a hysterosalpingogram. And the doctor was Chinese. And I could not understand. He had such a thick accent. I could not understand what he was saying. I'm laying there bawling. I'm like, what did he say? And she was like, your left tube is completely blocked, but your right tube is not. So she was like, I'm going to take out your left tube. We'll see what happens. So in December of 2010, or 2009, I have the doctor wrote in her notes that she removed half of my fallopian tube. The fallopian tube is probably about 4 inches long, 4 or 5 inches long. So that would leave you about probably that much of fallopian tube left. I had that much left that was nothing but scar tissue. She told me she literally did not know how I even was able to get pregnant, how sperm got through that little thing of scar tissue. So I have the test in December, or the surgery in December to take that out. I meet a guy in March and started dating him on my birthday in April. And on June 8th of 2010, I found out I was pregnant with my daughter. And my due date is February 14th, 2011, which is 10 years to the day of me finding out I was pregnant the very first time. So I kind of knew everything was going to be okay. I was on pins and needles for the first 20 weeks that I was pregnant. I refused to go to the doctor during week 20 of my pregnancy because I was like, that was bad luck the last time. But with my daughter, it was a textbook pregnancy. I couldn't have asked for a better pregnancy. The only thing I had that was bad was heartburn, but she was born with a head full of dark hair. She was born on February 9th, 2011 at 11:29 in the morning. I had to have a C-section because she was footling breech. But other than that, everything was fine. And I decided to not have any more kids after her because I didn't want to take the risk again. So she's my miracle baby. And if you find yourself watching this video and you're going through the same road that I did, don't be afraid to ask questions. I'll look back here from time to time and answer anything that I can. But welcome to my channel. And this is going to be also like a true crime channel. I'm getting a couple cases together of videos that I'm going to produce. And I'll see you guys soon. Thank you for listening.